Hello there. This is your Uncle Jimmy from Indiana, Pennsylvania. I've had some friends of mine, some different people that have asked me to do a review of Tucker Carlson's report on our senatorial for the candidate for the U.S. Senate, this Fetterman fella, and I thought that we'd kind of play it over and just see what comments he made, and maybe I could throw in my 2 cents worth, and so we'll start and see what Tucker has to say.
Tucker Carlson, tonight there are an awful lot of forgotten little towns in this country, and Braddock, Pennsylvania is definitely one of them. It's only 11 miles outside Pittsburgh, but Braddock is basically empty at this point. Only 1,700 people live there. That's down from a population of more than 18,000 during the Second World War. Braddock is now so underpopulated that you can buy a 4-bedroom home there with a 2-car garage right in the middle of town for $3,000. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself on Realtor.com. So, you know the story. For decades, the biggest employer in Braddock was manufacturing, something called the Edgar Thomson Steelworks. In fact, Andrew Carnegie built...
That's right. I'm gonna mention at this point that, Braddock, Pennsylvania was a very thriving community. It was built on the steel industry. Andrew Carnegie put his Edgar Thomson works down there, and there was thriving businesses. The place was booming. Lots of stores. There was other manufacturers. The place was jumping. I think there was even a Packard dealer down there, and the place today is, well, it kind of looks like that. It's all a big slum now, and and we'll let Tucker talk about this, but this Fetterman, he came there, and he became the mayor, and now he's claiming he revitalized the place. There's ads of his, which maybe in another segment I'll cover, but Tucker is right. The place is a mess. I wouldn't drive through there without my doors locked, and it's a slum. But let's let Tucker continue.
There, along with his first stone public library, which still stands. So for generations, Braddock, Pennsylvania was a real place, and then inevitably the steel plant closed.
And that's what it looks like today. You could drive down the streets, the places are all vacant, burned out, and we'll let Tucker continue.
The usual disasters arrived: unemployment, hopelessness, drugs. People left by the thousands. But one man saw an opportunity in Braddock, Pennsylvania. Not an opportunity for the town, but an opportunity for himself. That man's name was John Fetterman. Fetterman was 35 years old and had never in his life had a real job. Fetterman was not from Braddock, hardly. He grew up in an affluent neighborhood 4 hours away. Fetterman had spent his adult life going to school, first to business school, then to Harvard for a so-called Masters of Public Policy, which for the uninitiated is an utterly meaningless document that you pay hundreds of thousands of.
Yeah, it's what he's saying. It's one of these, what I call a bullshit degree. You're not really, you can't really do much of anything with the degree. From what I understand, this Fetterman, he never had a job in his life. His parents are very affluent, and he never worked. I don't even think he was a paper boy. He did nothing. He sat on his big goofy buffoon ass of his, and he did nothing. But I'm just going to let Tucker continue. I don't think anybody can challenge what he's saying here. But let's move on with the program.
Dollars to get in order to tell people that you went to Harvard. But in Fetterman's case, it wasn't expensive at all. It was free. His dad paid for it and paid for everything else. As the Philadelphia Inquirer put it, for a long stretch lasting well into his 40s, deep into middle age, Fetterman's main source of income came from his parents. They gave him and his family $54,000 in 2015 alone.
Can you imagine that? You're doing nothing. You're sitting on your big dummy ass and you're doing nothing, and you're not pulling your own weight. You're making your daddy pay for everything, and you're into your 40s and you've done nothing. And then look at that, $54,000 alone in 2015. Like I said, the guy never had a real job in his life, and Tucker, he's going to continue into this, but this fella, he's going around pretending he's like a working man, and he's worked, and he rebuilt Braddock, and that's a complete that's a goddamn lie. He's done nothing down there. He's done jack shit. And but anyway, you get the idea. The boy, the fella's he's a chiseler. But let's keep going here.
In other words, John Fetterman was a classic trustafarian, a flaky middle-aged man looking for a purpose in life. And in Braddock, Pennsylvania, he found one. In 2005, a year after arriving in Braddock, Fetterman announced he was running for mayor. And amazingly, boldly, given that he was a professional student living off his rich family, John Fetterman decided to run as a blue-collar populist. But the media asked no questions. They loved it. In John Fetterman, the media saw themselves.
Well, that's the thing. Up here in Indiana, Pennsylvania, we get a lot of the Pittsburgh stations, and they're very left-wing. They don't ask the hard questions. And frankly speaking, when he ran for mayor, I wonder if anybody even ran against him. He got in that little, that Allegheny County Democratic machine over down there, and he made the connections. And who's gonna really oppose him for a mayorship in Braddock? I had read about him when he did come to town there, and I thought, this guy is an opportunist. And what Tucker also is not telling you is this guy, for years, he ran for the U.S. Senate before, he ran for a couple other things, and he didn't make it, but apparently he did enough brown nosing in that Pennsylvania State Democrat Party that he was able to wheedle the lieutenant governorship. Basically, he got the nod on that, and he ran with this wolf, and he won. But up to that point, this guy, and to this day, really, he's never had a real job. But I'm gonna let Tucker continue here.
Just like them. So Fetterman narrowly won the race, and then the campaign to boost John Fetterman's career began in earnest. The Guardian newspaper described John Fetterman as the coolest mayor in the country. The New York Times told its readers, who didn't know any better, that John Fetterman had, quote, turned the busted town of Braddock, PA, into a national symbol of hope, hard work, and all.
But that's it. See, I understand he's running campaign ads, which I think I might some night I'll screen them and we'll critique them. But people that don't live in the area, they have no idea that he's full of shit and that he did nothing. And so they, he's doing all this. He didn't do anything. But let's let Tucker continue. I'm getting a little emotional here.
Authentic blue jeans. Wow, how inspiring. Fetterman thought it was. He went on a national tour to brag about how he was single-handedly saving this benighted mill town in western Pennsylvania. He gave a TED Talk, of course he did, about how he was running Braddock using the lessons that he learned at Harvard. In 2011, he went, of course he did, to the Aspen Ideas Festival to further brag.
Now, he was building national support for himself, going around with this bullshit story that he had turned Braddock around. He didn't do jack shit down there. You know what? Some night we're gonna do a little tour, driving tour of Braddock. We're gonna keep the doors locked, but it's like there was a nuclear holocaust down there. The place it's a mess, and this guy's going around marketing. This is exactly what I thought with this fella. I thought this guy he's going to try to exploit those people down there just to further himself. He's a goddamn carpetbagger. But anyway, let's let Tucker continue.
Here's what he said, quote, "We created the first art gallery in the four-town region with artist studios. We did public art installations. And I don't know if you consider it art exactly, but I consider growing organic vegetables in the shadow of a steel mill an art. And that has attracted homesteading."
It is a joke. Art, that doesn't create jobs down there. You need some good democratic, traditional Democratic Party, blue collar jobs. This guy, art, raising organic vegetables. At the same time, you could get yourself shot. I think it's ridiculous. But we're going to let him continue here.
It's so perfect. Homesteading, organic vegetables, art installations. And also, again, inevitably, a heaping dose of climate theology, all imported from Harvard. So Fetterman imposed on a town with no jobs carbon caps on Braddock, Pennsylvania. And he claimed these carbon caps would somehow, he never explained how, bring more manufacturing jobs back.
See, that's something I actually didn't know. Carbon caps. There's nothing down there. There's not. The place is blighted. And he's putting carbon cap, and he thinks we're going to attract industry. That's a contradiction in terms here. But this is really something. This Tucker fellow's really good, so we're going to continue.
He called this initiative "Carbon Caps Equals Hard Hats." So expensive, unreliable energy will mean more manufacturing jobs. And yet somehow no one laughed at him. So John Fetterman kept going. In a 2000...
and before he continues, why, if he had offered some tax abatements and, incentives to bring industry down, but that's something he never did. That Allegheny County never does that. If you're local down, in the area, that everybody's moved across the border to like Butler County, and they got these brand new beautiful buildings, these little like factories, all these businesses. It's amazing. You go across the border, all this prosperity, but this guy just feeds right into all this Allegheny County Democratic Party machine bullshit. Just tax us more, screw us over, and we get nothing. But I'll let Tucker continue.
9 advertisement firms promised that, quote, "with a smart, economically viable carbon cap policy in place, communities like Braddock can begin to build its manufacturing and middle class back up. This whole notion that we can continue to operate as we have been and ignore climate change is ludicrous." They loved it at the Aspen Institute. And to be fair, John Fetterman did not ignore climate change. He talked about climate change endlessly. He made climate change the centerpiece of his administration in Braddock, Pennsylvania. As for actually running the town or improving the town of Braddock, he was not interested, not even a little bit interested, and that's provable. As mayor, according to public records obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, Fetterman missed more than a third of the borough's monthly meetings. He was off at the Aspen.
Yeah, he was out touring the country and promoting himself, and who knows what else. But we'll let Tucker continue.
Institute. In his entire tenure as the mayor of Braddock, John Fetterman cast just a single vote at a city council meeting, and it was a meaningless one. It was a procedural vote for borough president. So what happened next? This is always our favorite part of the story. What were the results? How did Braddock, Pennsylvania fare under the leadership of John Fetterman? That's really the only question that matters. And again, we want to be as fair and objective as we can be. So we're going to tell you that under his tenure as mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, the seas did not rise. That is true. Braddock is still on dry land. Of course, it's very far from the ocean, but it's still dry. So his climate policy worked. He can be proud of that. Unfortunately, everything else fell apart in Braddock. People kept fleeing. Braddock's population is currently at its lowest level ever recorded. The median income in Braddock, Pennsylvania is $14,000 a year. More than a third of households in Braddock live below the poverty line. Braddock, by the way, has one of the highest crime rates in the state of Pennsylvania.
That's right. It's terrible down there. It's all sorts of hoodlums going around the streets. It's not safe. But we'll let him continue, and there's a little story. If he doesn't tell you, I'm going to tell you about Fetterman, trying to apprehend a criminal, or who he thought was a criminal. But we'll continue here.
In 2018, shortly after Fetterman left office, Braddock's per capita murder rate was higher than it is in some of the most dangerous countries in the world. Honduras and Belize are safer than Braddock, Pennsylvania. So that's a failure. And in a functioning system, a record like this would have disqualified John Fetterman from ever running for anything again. He failed demonstrably as a leader. It had a higher murder rate than Honduras and the lowest population ever recorded.
Can you imagine that? He's lost even more. Even before he went in there, that place had been down the toilet for decades, and then he shows up just to try to make a name for himself, and even more people leave. There's you heard Tucker. It's got a murder rate higher than some of these banana republics down there. But anyway, let's continue about this senatorial candidate.
Sorry, climate change didn't improve the town. So in a fair system, a system that cared about achievement, a meritocratic system, John Fetterman would be leaving politics on the express train and moving on to something like interpretive dance. Try that. Maybe get his dad to pay for ski lessons and move to Aspen or something. But we don't have a functioning meritocracy, much less a functioning
No, I don't think so.
A very broken one. So John Fetterman set his sights even higher. Having wrecked Braddock, he became lieutenant governor, and now he plans to run for the United States Senate. What's he going to do if he gets there? Well, his idea is to make the entire state of Pennsylvania and the entire country much more like Braddock, with much higher crime rates. And we're not making that up. Here he is, John Fetterman, in 2020 as lieutenant governor, fantasizing about giving amnesty to thousands of violent criminals, including murderers.
If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and fix one thing, what would it be?
Life without parole in Pennsylvania. We could save billions in revenue long term. We could save thousands of lives and not make anyone less safe. And
that's crazy. That's absolutely insane. You've got these hardened criminals that are on parole. They've committed, armed robbery, burglary, armed assault, all sexual crimes, and this son of a bitch wants to let them run free. Like run free, like Born Free. The movie, and it's outrageous. And then look here, we expunge many permanent records of people who have been living their best lives for a charge. Okay, somebody, they've got a real serious crime. He wants to give them an expungement. So when you're running your business, you do a background check. It isn't worth nothing. You could have somebody who had been convicted of a heinous crime, and they got an expungement, and they're sitting there like they're a little innocent waif. And what are you going to do? You don't know you're hiring an embezzler into your company, or a rapist, or a burglar, or a thug, somebody that's committed aggravated assault. This is just crazy.
Also expunges many permanent records of people that have been living their best lives and have been paying well beyond when they should have for a charge.
Bullshit. You commit the crime, you do the time, you get convicted, that's it. You did it. You should be responsible for your actions. And you commit some heavy-duty crimes, that should stain you the rest of your born days. And they shouldn't just be able to just walk away and pretend it never happened. Think of the victims, and not only the problems they're going to create. These unsuspecting people, they could move into your neighborhood. You do a criminal background check, and it's expunged. And what, he committed a sexual crime? That's crazy. But let's continue.
That they caught, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
So in huge parts of Pennsylvania, which is a big state, a real state, filled with really nice people, and it was an economic powerhouse for more than 100 years, in huge parts of that state, there are no jobs. There is poverty, there is hopelessness, and there are huge numbers of drug ODs. That state's been devastated by opioids, by fentanyl. But John Fetterman, if he had one wish, if he could make one change to the state of Pennsylvania, he'd let the murderers out. Right. That's who he cares about. So in Pennsylvania, typically, if you commit murder, you get life in prison, as you should. You're not allowed to kill people. But Fetterman would change that. He'd like you out of jail as quickly as possible. Talk about a rich kid concern, by the way. No actual populist or actual working class person talks like.
No, he's sort of a rich dummy, you know. He never worked for a living. He never had to, you know, live in the real world and have responsibility. So he's doing stuff like this. You know, it's crazy. You know, he never had any responsibility, so he lives in this little cuckoo world, and he's going around, and he wants to use us like his test gerbils and his experiment, and, you know, it's sort of like Richard Gere and the gerbil. Well, you know, I'll tell you right now, he's not shoving me up his ass. I'm voting against him, but I'm going to continue the show here.
This worries about punishing murderers too much. Maybe if you achieved the first 115 things on your to-do list, you'd worry about, are the murderers serving too much time in prison? That'd be after you got people jobs, after you convinced their children to stay in the state where they were born, after you fixed the fact that thousands are dying of drug ODs. Only rich kids think like that. And by the way, only rich kids wear hoodies to political events.
Yeah, how about that? He's wearing a hoodie. He looks like Uncle Fester wearing sort of a hoodie thing. Look at this. What is he, part of a satanic cult or something? I mean, why don't you at least do, you know, if you didn't want to wear a suit, you could wear a nice collared shirt, you know, like a Carhartt if you wanted, or, you know, something like that. But you're going around like this. Well, what the hell's that supposed to be? But anyway, let's continue here.
I'm a working man. I'm wearing a hoodie. No working man actually wears a hoodie to a political event. All your stupid little fake tattoos. It's a costume.
Yeah, and he's got like these tattoos like he's some sort of working guy, like he was a sailor, a truck driver. You know, he was nothing. He was just a big dope. That, you know, his father was paying all his bills. But let's continue.
Of course. Duh. It's not real. But John Fetterman, inspired by his time at Harvard and the Aspen Institute, would like to free a third of the prison population in Pennsylvania. And it's just for starters. Watch.
I was on a panel with Secretary Wetzel earlier before the pandemic hit, and he said something remarkable that I agree with. He said, we could reduce our prison population by a third and not make anyone less safe in Pennsylvania. And that's a profound statement.
Oh, that's crazy. You let all these convicts out, there's going to be trouble. Because there's a lot of these people, they're what under the British common law they call it incorrigible, meaning you can't change them. And if they do the crime, do the time. But let's continue.
It's not a profound statement. It's absurd. It's ridiculous.
I agree.
It's a profound statement. Where do you learn to talk like this? It's a profound statement, says the hoodie guy. You're an idiot. You've never had a job. And you wrecked the town that you ran. You didn't even show up at council meetings. What? Climate change. Let the murderers out. We'll have a much safer society when we let the incorrigibly violent roam among us. Right. This is the guy who made Braddock, Pennsylvania more dangerous than Honduras. And, of course, the point is not simply to wreck what he inherited, what we all inherited. It's to change the state forever for his own political benefit. The point is to flood the state of Pennsylvania with brand new voters, all of them loyal to the Democratic Party. More voter fraud, please. Fetterman has been in lockstep with the leaders of his party on that question from the very beginning, and that's why he would like to get rid of all barriers to voter fraud, including and especially voter ID, as soon as possible.
In my own state, they are going to attempt to pass a constitutional amendment, making sure that universal voting ID for every time you vote, not just when you sign up to vote, but every time you vote, because they understand that at any given time, there's tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians who typically are on the poorer side and are people of color that are less likely to have their ID at any one given time.
That's a bunch of hogwash. Everybody has their state ID. They could apply for it if they don't have a driver's license. They have their driver's license. They go into a state store. They got to present their ID. They go anywhere, and that's an insult. That's very racist to him to say that there's that black people don't have their ID, they won't have it. I mean, that's an outrageous statement, and obviously he is for voter fraud, and saying, well, let anybody show up at the poll and say, oh, I'm so and so and I'm going to vote. You'd have no proof of who he is or who he or she is. That's crazy, and that's just asking for fraud. But anyway, we're going to continue.
So poor people don't have IDs? Really? Because everyone who lives in our society over the age of 18 has a government-issued ID, because you can't live here otherwise. And you can't collect any government benefits without one. You can't do anything without one. So that's a lie. He's affirmatively abetting voter fraud. Now, we should tell you that the clips we just played were John Fetterman speaking before he had, and we say this with no glee, but instead with deep sympathy, a massive stroke. His campaign says the stroke occurred shortly before he won the Democratic state primary in May. Whenever it happened or whatever caused it, the stroke has been profound and has rendered Fetterman unable to speak coherently. And again, we're not being mean. We say this with sympathy, but it's true. Because it's not just about John Fetterman and how he's feeling. It's about the country he hopes to control if elected to the United States Senate. And so it's bad. It's really bad. Here he was campaigning recently in Pittsburgh, for example.
Just earlier today, I was so proud to march with you in downtown Pittsburgh. Labor Day.
Okay, I'm back. My camera was giving me some issues here. But what I was saying is, if you're familiar with western Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, it's a big Democrat Party stronghold, and these unions, they're all, for like over 100 years, they've been endorsing the Democrats. They're supposed to be helping them keep these jobs, do this, get business, and they've been working against them. They're not doing anything like that. They're for all these crazy causes like, climate change, transgender, giving money away, and they're taxing the piss out of everybody, and yet they're still pretending they're for the working man. It's crazy. But let's continue with Tucker.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor. I live 8 minutes away from here, and when I leave tonight, I got 3 miles away, Dr. Oz in his mansion in New Jersey. You've got a friend and you have an ally. Send me to Washington, D.C.
It's not even worth making fun of. It's sad, but when cognition goes, when the ability to think clearly disappears, and in his case it obviously has, what's left? The talking points. That's all that remains, and that's all he has, the talking points. The union way of life. This is a kid who lived off his parents until he was in his mid-40s. What? He's never been in a union? What are you even talking about, you fraud? So, not surpringly...
Well, I couldn't have said that better myself. He's a fraud. He hasn't shown anything he's done. And this thing, whether they want to admit it or not, he had that stroke, he had a pacemaker. There's some genuine concerns. As you can see, he was sort of like Biden. He was getting mixed up. Biden, he had a couple brain operations himself, but that's for another video. But this guy has some serious problems, and the thing is, we're going to be stuck with this problem if he wins this thing. So let's listen to Tucker. We'll continue.
Fetterman has refused up until today to schedule a debate with his opponent, Dr. Oz. Just hours ago, he announced he's willing to debate. But no details are forthcoming. Sometime in mid-October, of course, when the early voting has already been well in progress. It's starting now, by the way, the early voting in Pennsylvania. So if you delay the debate till right before the election, it's irrelevant because people have already voted.
Exactly. See, He's afraid to debate Dr. Oz. He criticized him, saying, "Oh, he's living in mansions." But at least Oz made his own damn money. At least he did something. At least he believed in the free enterprise system, and he worked, and he's a big success. And I hand it to him, and he's still cognitively functioning, unlike our friend Fetterman here. But let's let Tucker continue.
Only Democrats seem to understand this. He doesn't even talk to the media at this point because he can't. In some cases, here's one, his staffers won't even let him answer questions that he has posed. Watch this.
Continue on.
Hey, John, are you afraid to debate Dr. Oz? Are you afraid to debate Dr. Oz?
Thank you, John.
Look at this. They say they wouldn't even answer the question. They had to have this guy come over, run blocker, and he walks away because he knows Dr. Oz would make mincemeat out of him in a debate. He can't even string his sentences together anymore, and even if he could, his arguments make no sense. It's kooky. It's crazy.
You gonna debate him? He's offered 5 debates. Are you gonna debate him?
His hoodie and his fraudulent tattoos. I mean, honestly, this is like the barista in Brooklyn dressing like a lumberjack. Oh, please, go back to Oberlin, you fake. So there's a huge problem here. The guy can't talk, okay? And even CNN has acknowledged that. John Fetterman, a candidate for the U.S. Senate, cannot speak. Watch.
Members of the United Steelworkers Tuesday, Fetterman was on message, but often halting in his speech and occasionally dropped words mid-sentence.
Being anti-union is
Anti-union?
anti-American. What is wrong with demanding for an easy, safe
easy money?
kind of their income to a safe place for them
He's a babbling idiot.
to win? Or excuse me, to work.
Fetterman declined to answer questions from CNN and other reporters at the event.
So we could go on and play you more tape, but it's just awful, and nobody wants to watch that. We don't want to play it for you. We just want to make the point.
So the thing is, and Tucker, he hasn't quite said it yet, but this Fetterman, he's making very few appearances anywhere, no interviews. The first part of it is his idiotic ideas are crazy, and the second part is that now he can't even string the sentences together anymore. He's sort of like another version of Biden, but he would be run through his handlers if he got in. But let's continue.
Is completely impaired. That's not some kind of Republican talking point. It's completely real. So think about what that means. The Democratic Party has not replaced him. This has been going on since he got the nomination, but he's still in the race. That is shocking, and it's insulting, not simply to voters in Pennsylvania, but to the rest of us who, if this guy's elected, will have to live under his rule. But the Democratic Party prefers it that way. They did it with Biden. They're trying it again with Fetterman. Run a wax dummy for office.
Yeah, it's a remote-controlled dummy.
People who can't form complete sentences apparently seem less threatening to voters. How much damage can he really do? He can't even talk. Apparently that's what they think. And of course, people like Fetterman and Biden are much easier to control. So on the one occasion Fetterman has actually been asked directly about this, wait a second, you're cognitively impaired. How did he respond? Well, as a victim, of course. If you've got a problem with a brain-damaged senator, you're a bigot. Watch this.
Can you even imagine that if you had a doctor that was mocking your illness? Ridiculing that? Well, here we are. Here we are right now. I would like to think that Dr. Oz may have really lost his way if you're going to make fun of somebody that had a stroke.
Oh, making fun of people. How dare you do that? He's disabled. Shut up. Accept it. How dare you acknowledge the obvious? You have no right. This is all about John Fetterman's personal journey. So you're not allowed to ask, well, how does this affect me if that guy...
Exactly. If somebody's not up for it, if you had, say, a professional football player and he had a stroke and he's having some problems, no disrespect to him, but, we're paying you a lot of money. You're in an important position on the team. You're not going to be able to perform to the optimum ability of somebody we'd want in there, and that's a legitimate concern. And for him to say, well, that's insensitive and terrible, well, I'm disabled. Well, if you're disabled and you can't do the job, then you should withdraw from the race. But of course, he's never going to do that. He's too into himself to do that, and the party machine wouldn't want him to do that. They're behind him. They got the money behind him, and they're gonna promote him. But let's continue.
Guy who can't think clearly is elected to the United States Senate. That's impolite. They do this on so many issues, and they're doing it with him, and it works. Most people just shut up. It's considered completely out of bounds to mention the fact that John Fetterman is completely incapable of representing Pennsylvania in the United States Senate. And as we said, that fact, and it is a fact, is fine with the people who run the Democratic Party. They just want the power. But the rest of us should be very worried by this. If they can get this guy elected statewide in this nation's 5th largest state, this guy, an incompetent husk with incredibly stupid and totally provably destructive ideas, a man with no record of achievement at all, a man with a long list of documented failures, a man who, by the way, cannot even think clearly. If they can do that, they can do literally anything.
I have to say, I couldn't say it better myself. This is Tucker. I really like his show, and he was on a real. I mean, this is a real gem of a piece he has here. But let's let him finish it up.
Anything.
Well, that was
Subscribe
it.
to the Fox News.
And that was a great piece, and he's right. I'm going to put some more pieces out during the campaign here, if there's any interest. There's a couple stories I'm going to do, but I thought Tucker gave a great overall summary of what's going on here. And well, this is your Uncle Jimmy from Indiana, Pennsylvania. Glad you could stop by the old homestead and visit me. And I'm going to sign out and wish you a good night. Take care there.